Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this COVIDSafe Plan legal compliance session run by Kaizen Synergy Law Firm. My name is Nihal Samara. I'm the General Counsel and Legal Director here at Kaizen Synergy. I'd like to welcome you all to this morning's session. Today, we're going to focus on the COVIDSafe Plan and what community service organisations have done in terms of preparing and also getting this plan, their own plans up and working within their agencies. There is a lot of information out there. There are a lot of changes in rules based on where community service organisations are based. So what we're actually going to be covering here today is around what actually works and how agencies have put together the COVIDSafe Plan and some of their strategies and materials that we'll cover off today. So this is really a bit of a hands-on session in terms of what has already really worked well for agencies that we've worked with as well. So let's jump straight into it. As always, we'd like to pay our respects to the elders past and present upon the lands on which we all meet. While this session is being run by webinar, we do pay our respects to the traditional owners from where you join us from around the country today. That said, just a couple of housekeeping items that I will also cover off. All of the materials that we are using today will be circulated around to all attendees. That includes these PowerPoint slides. That also includes the dashboard login details that I'll actually show you, and also other reference material that we'll also discuss in this short webinar as well too. We will also be recording this webinar all the way up to the question and answer part of the session, where we will actually stop the recording to protect people's privacy. You can, and we will open up the phone lines and computer lines. You can, by all means, ask any questions that you have, and we'll stay on the line to answer those. Alternatively, if you like to raise your hand on the buttons that you can see, or ask questions that way, and we'll read them out to everybody as well too. So you do have a couple of options there. So this webinar will also be recorded and posted on our YouTube channel. Our law firm has been running COVID-19 legal compliance webinars throughout the course of this year, at least I'd say once a week for the past few months, and all of those are available on the Gemba 360 YouTube channel for reference purposes as well. So with it, as I've mentioned, we're going to look at what other agencies are doing well within their COVID-safe plans and systems. So let us show you what is actually working really well in terms of what they're actually looking at. Now, the COVID-safe plan itself was taken by an announcement from the Prime Minister in terms of looking at a step 1, step 2, step 3 process. And as part of that, you would have seen Prime Minister Scott Morrison hold this up and also cover off that each state and territory is open to do its own process and rules in terms of opening these up. And it's almost been described as a menu for different states and territories to use. And we're seeing that actually now, with Victoria having to reinforce lockdown measures and also now talking about potentially stage 4 lockdowns, whereas you compare other states like Queensland, as of this week, New South Wales has outbreaks, so they're having to assess where they're sitting. But then you look at WA, Tasmania, Northern Territory, which is effectively at different points along this step 1, step 2, step 3 framework in terms of where it's sitting. Now, obviously for agencies like yourselves that have joined us today, one of the questions is, well, where do you effectively sit and how do you design a COVID-safe plan to effectively monitor and support your staff, but also support and operate services within this very challenging public health period? There is a lot of information that's out there, and a lot of clients that we've supported around this have, and this is just some of them, some of the information that's out there, have put this together for us as well too. With that, there's everything from the COVIDSafe app that people are talking about. There's three-step framework documents. There's legislation under the Biosecurity Acts. There's posters. There's a whole raft of even industry different plans. But a lot of it comes back to, well, how is it actually going to work, and what are your obligations as a community service agency, as a not-for-profit agency, and where does it actually sit as your responsibilities, and gauging how to actually put this together. And so what we've seen is some agencies have run forward putting together their own COVID-safe plan. Some have relied on industry codes, but then they're looking at this going, well, where is the line in the sand that I know what I'm doing is either correct or meets, I'm going to say, a minimum legal compliance standards that we need to follow, or if the laws or regulations change, how do I then adjust the COVID-safe plan to ensure that my staff are safe and protected, but also the services that are run are done in an effective way? And obviously for not-for-profits, reporting then to your boards is then an additional issue in terms of, well, am I giving my boards the right information as a director and officer to ensure that they're equally briefed as well too? And keeping in mind that a lot of the boards working in not-for-profits are obviously volunteer positions, and their time is valuable, let alone actually running your own businesses and not-for-profit agencies as well. So what we have found that actually works well is taking a number of the plan, but also looking at what policies you need to have in place, and also what we call the pandemic forms that you need to have in place as well. So while a COVID-safe plan, the step 1, step 2, step 3 type of framework is good, the industry codes are good, really what's also required is what are the policies that support that for staff to be aware of, and what are the pandemic forms that your agency needs to use in terms of assessing whether your plan is actually correct as well. I will just hold on and actually answer a question that one of the attendees have raised around this. I note that there is a question, someone's just actually raised their hand, and happy to answer a question if you like. I have just looked to unmute you. You can actually unmute yourself if you like, if you did have a question that you wanted to raise. Nope, if there's not, you can type the question into the presentation as well too, if you like as well. So really we've taken a three-step process around the plan, the policy, and the pandemic forms. Now, on that, part of the work that we've done is also provide an online dashboard, and I'll come to that to show you how it all brings together. But this is something that agencies have actually used, and it actually works incredibly well. So there are some agencies, Aboriginal agencies and mainstream agencies, that have utilized this to track staff, to support clients in terms of the COVID plan and reporting and distribution of policies. And I'll come to this shortly. Now, that said, part of this three-step plan was to take it apart and divide it into specific stages. And I'll show you what that looks like shortly, and what has, and I repeat, what has actually worked and is working incredibly well for other not-for-profit and community-based service agencies. So while we acknowledge that there is the plan, step 1, step 2, step 3, that's aligned with what the Commonwealth direction is, what does this actually look like and how does this actually work? So whether you're a religious service based in regional Victoria or a multi-state health service, this effectively can work for yourselves in terms of how we're looking at doing it. Now, one of the things I will cover off is that there is a responsibility on duties of directors and officers, which you all are, in terms of your requirements to exercise due diligence to ensure that your employees comply with their duties and obligations. In relation to the COVID-19, due diligence means that you need to effectively acquire and keep your knowledge of the COVID-19 situation up to date. And such advice is taken from authoritative sources like the Australian Government Department of Health, and checking for updates to safety advice, particularly around safe work, looking at WHS hazards and risks, and looking at how COVID-19 could affect your workplace and workers, and making sure that your workplace is properly resourced to manage work health and safety risks during the COVID-19 outbreak, and resources effectively being used. And we'll show you what this is repeated in safe work guidelines, and we'll walk through how this can be done. Now, why this is important is because obviously COVID-19 will be with us for some time. So it's important that your business has a plan and continues to plan to keep your workplace healthy, safe, and virus-free. So that's why there is such an interest in these webinars that we obviously run. So what is the COVIDSafe Plan really looking to do? It's really looking to do 4 things, and I'll step through what this looks like and obviously how we take apart and build this plan up for yourselves. And this is part of what we're covering off today. So really, at its core, the COVIDSafe Plan is going to ensure that staff are kept safe, the community and services that you deliver are supported and delivered, importantly. It can change based on your business services, and access to support to continue to deliver services is important as well. Now, as part of this, it is very easy to be lost in doing an audit all the time. So effectively, the COVIDSafe Plan, where you in fact continue just to do the plan, but not actually deliver services. And that was a fear that many agencies, when this first started, actually looked at a number of months ago. What we've seen is that they've actually stepped this through, and using the plan, the policies, and the forms to engage staff will actually assist them to make key decisions when they need to. So in fact, developing a plan, one of the things that agencies have said to us is, well, once we've got a plan up, or developing a plan, how do we actually know that the plan that we actually have is enough? There are obviously industry plans that have been done by different industry representative bodies and codes, but effectively some agencies have turned around and said, well, how do we know that the plan that we have is enough? Now, in saying this, what we have done in working with agencies over the last few months is to take what we call a quality standards approach. And I'm not going to go into the theory too much of this, but just to give you the background on the approach that's been taken so that you can see how it actually can work for your agency. Now, quality standards, whether you work in education, whether you work in community services or health, whether you work in also other service-based areas, there are standards that your company and agency should be following. And so with it, what we have done is taken this quality standards approach and dividing it up in terms of what the legal compliance areas are, looking at a self-assessment, identifying areas for improvement, and this effectively leads into the development of your COVIDSafe Plan itself. And again, just as a diagrammatic approach, looking at the legislation, so things like the biosecurity legislation or the relevant state areas, the Public Health and Wellbeing Acts, and then looking at what the Commonwealth guidelines are, whether that comes from the Department of Health, which I'll cover off in the next couple of slides, the safe work checklists as well, and then also looking at the relevant state or territory pandemic plan. And we've just put a picture of the Victorian pandemic plan for the Victorian health sector in this diagram, just for diagrammatic purposes. By following the arrows, what that gives us is a self-assessment around looking for feeding that into your COVIDSafe plan. And what that gives us is areas for improvement that we need to identify. And the areas for improvement are really the gaps that we need to action within each agency. What that leads to is then the linking back to what the step 1, step 2, step 3 process is. And you'll find that effectively what we have here is then the development of the register for the COVIDSafe plan itself. Of course, on this, it means that you've got your compliance checklist done, you've got your self-assessment, you've then got your, and it feeds into your identifying areas for improvement and your COVIDSafe plan itself. So when looking at what the Commonwealth then says, there are effectively, and I'll just jump a slide ahead, 14 separate items that the Commonwealth have looked at. And this is right from the start when they've provided Commonwealth directions. And we've just highlighted some of the key areas that we're going to take apart today and show you where it sits. So as part of ensuring a formal risk assessment process and applying a hierarchy of appropriate controls, and this is wording taken from the Commonwealth document, COVID-19, of what employers should be doing. It says that these will be specific to your work, your workplace, and your workers. Possible controls include, but are not limited to. So it starts to set the key areas that you should be looking at. And so what we've done is looking at each one of these particular 14 areas and map these back, map these back to the COVIDSafe plan steps. So looking at employers should have policies, procedures, technology to support employees to work from home. Right, so let's have a look at, for example, the policy part of that. So really what we should be looking at is policies that you should be having, as well as procedures, and also forms or some sort of work to support employees working from home and documenting that down. Similarly, when we go through each of these items, you then look at even down to things like number 7, undertaking frequent cleaning and disinfection of workplaces, particularly objects and surfaces that are frequently touched. So you can see that the Commonwealth has started to give some of these items in. Obviously, what agencies then turn around and say, okay, we've got, let's say, items 1 and 7, but what does that actually mean? It also means, okay, when we talk about developing a policy that requires staff to work from home, okay, but how do we, what forms do we need, and how do we in fact do that sort of thing? You then equally have obviously publications from Safe Work around some of the guidelines which we've looked at, and looked at what the employee's obligations actually are. So when you start to try and piece these things together, it can be quite complicated of saying, yeah, we've got these guidelines, but then how do I then roll that out to agencies? So what we've looked at as part of this, and it's basically an off-the-shelf way of doing it. And as I said, this is something that other agencies have run with and used for a number of months from the start of this particular public health challenge. So there are some agencies, for example, a company called Wild Projects, where they're based in Queensland. It is a smaller agency of only a couple of people. They actually provide camping services to schools and do a fabulous job out there. And it's a smaller agency of only 2 people really, or a few people on the ground, 2 or 3 people on the ground, but they provide a lot of camps and services. Equally, at the other end of the scale, there are multiple health and community services of 200-300 staff working on different sites, providing everything from justice to residential aged care services to mental health and outreach workers and all kinds of things, and medical services, multiple services from multiple sites. Now, what's common about this is that both of those agencies have used this same system processes. What they've done is this, where effectively you've got your plan in place around the key areas that I've shown you that they've covered off, step 1, step 2, step 3. They've looked at the safe work requirements and then looked at what specific forms that staff need to use to actually complete, whether it be on a day-to-day basis. It informs them about what's actually going on, whether that be what we call a COVID daily assessment form, or some people do it weekly in terms of monitoring prevalence of staff that may have the virus in their workplace and how they manage that, or surveillance. Also, the working from home registers, cleaning registers as well too, which is what the Commonwealth directives have had, and how they report and view those. That then, once staff are involved in doing that and meeting their own obligations, then effectively that's forming their decisions in what they need to look at in terms of responding back into their plan itself. The policies around that, even down to travel restriction policies, has been adopted and changed as things change. Now, at the start, the policies focused on international travel to certain countries. Now we've seen just in the past week, those policies change into travel restrictions around certain postcodes and areas where hotspots are occurring, and they're changing their COVIDSafe Plan depending on what rules and requirements are coming out of the relevant states and territories. So when we look at this, the plan itself in operation covers off not only just the who's going to do what and where, but what policies are supporting this decision and what also pandemic forms that you need around it. Now, jumping into the dashboard, and to give you all access to this demo site itself, which you can simply do. You can basically go into gemba360.com. So click on gemba360.com. The username for this, quite simply, is 12345, and the password is 12345. Now, when you click on that, what will come up is the view of the COVID-19 dashboard. Now, this system and processes that we're talking about and showing you was actually used back in the past with the swine flu. You may remember that occurred a number of years ago. It's also been used to recover in bushfires more recently as well too. So this system that I'm showing you has a history in supporting agencies. It's also been used overseas in natural disasters and the like. Now, with it, you can't crash, break, or destroy the system in any way. So by all means, log in, you can go to access this by simply going to Google and clicking on gemba360.com and entering the username 12345 and password 12345. And that will take you into exactly what I'm showing you right now. So it is something that you can view. What you'll see, first of all, is we have set up a test user called Fred Flintstone, and we've got all the forms listed down on the left-hand side. These forms cover off the COVID daily assessment form. We've got a working from home form and a workstation form. And what this allows staff to do is to report to you around key things that need to happen. You've also got access to a COVID dashboard. And by clicking on what we call the disaster system, and I'll show you these forms in a minute of how these work, you can click in and log in on this and have a look. And we've got the projects listed here. And you can see we've got the COVIDSafe Plan Step 1, Step 2, Step 3. And also, if we go back to this side here, we've also got the HR area. And if you click on that, what this brings up is the profile for staff to actually update their specific profile information. So whether they're working from home and they need to access and update their, for example, emergency contact details and the likes, they can in fact do that. And you can see my details that they've added in. If they want to add it up, they can do that, and they can actually change and update their information. And this way, you're able to keep up to date with staff and the likes. Now let's go through this. So the COVIDSafe Plan. Clicking on the disaster module will open this page up here. So let me go into that. And when you click on the COVIDSafe Plan, what we have done is taken each of the Commonwealth requirements out of those 14 requirements and placed them in here. Here's a sample of what we have. So the first one is, and you can order these based on priority items. For example, the first one is looking at the policy readiness, and you can assign that to specific people and setting up the due date and the time that you need to have these actions, and email notifications go out. Quite simply, opening this up when we look at this means that you should be having your key policies covering the identified areas under these 7 areas. And this was taken directly from the pandemic plans for each state and territory. And this is what we've identified here. So this is what we suggest to actually look at. So as part of these tasks, what you're in fact doing is got your step-by-step process. The next one that we ask is, okay, let's have a look at reading through the safe work guidelines and assessing each of the sites. Now, in assessing each of the sites, you then look at it and say, well, right, well, how do I, and what information do we have? Now, if you remember, I showed you the safe work guidelines, and what we've taken here is on these forms here, you can look at completing your site audit. You can look at the safe work and what I can do to keep my workplace safe, adding a new entry. Now, equally, if we look at this information here, what we can actually see is if we look at this side by side, and I'll just bring this work up. So this is a document that we have. And equally for each of the sites, looking at the safe work guidelines of what you need to meet versus what people actually need to do, you can effectively run through and keep a register of each of what the staff are required to do in terms of keeping themselves safe, and also doing the same thing for each of your sites as well. Now, the good thing about this is that when staff complete this as well, and let me go through and I'll just say completed and reviewed for these items, and just to show you how this works is that that's been done. And so by having staff complete their own form, and I'll just mark this as completed, then effectively what I can see directly from here is that I've got the details of who's done what and when, that they've completed their own form, and that I've got the date and the time that it's actually been done. So in each of these cases, your footprints get left behind for each of the staff when they complete each of their assessment forms. And the same thing gets done for your specific workplaces. It also means that if you require staff to take photos, or that they have done it, and you want to say, right, I want to make sure that people have actually completed it and I want them to take photos. Well, you can actually attach specific in this section here, the evidence around this. So you can actually get staff, and some agencies have done this, to actually take photos to show that they've actually done this as well too, and load this in. So effectively what you've then got here is your full audit trails. Now, the other part that is required around let's have a look, staff ensuring that they're across their screening to make sure that staff don't have any symptoms, and they're recording that they don't, and you're providing safe services. Well, agencies have actually taken the relevant state forms, and this is what they call the COVID-19 assessment forms. And each chief medical officer in each state has given key directions on what they're actually looking for when assessing COVID-19 symptoms. And just to show you what the Victorian one looks like, we've loaded that in here. Now, for staff that are providing direct services, and so this is actually used right now by agencies, and there are some agencies where they provide community face-to-face contact, and they might be working in aged care, services, health or medical services, and even other, I'm going to say, high risk direct contact with client services as well. So with it, what they actually in this case do is get staff to actually log in each day and complete this form. So in that case, what we can see, I've logged in as Fred Flintstone, and I can see that the date and the time that this was actually lodged. What it asks me is, because I'm based in Victoria at this time, it says, have you actually visited any of these postcodes, or has anyone actually, have you been in contact with anyone in metropolitan Melbourne or Mitchell Shire? And this will change depending on where your agency is based around the country. And then they're actually asked whether these particular 6 or 7 specific criteria are met, whether they've got fever, whether they've got cough, whether there's a sore throat. And so if they were to answer yes to any one of these questions, an email automatically gets sent out to their manager saying, hey, this needs to be reviewed. Now, in the past few months, there are some agencies that literally get staff to do this every day as part of their screening. And again, what happens here is that it will automatically fire off an email. What it means, though, for your agency is that you've then got a trail to go back and make sure that if you needed to do any surveillance or contact tracing immediately with any of your staff, whether they're working from home, whether they're a volunteer, whether they're based in all different parts of the country, you can at any one stage identify exactly who and when has had any symptoms, any contact, or put the agency at risk or other staff, and able to verify it directly. And this can be done immediately. The good thing is that anytime somebody does something, you've then got these forms to go back and look at the dates, the times, the audit logs of who's done what and when. Now, in some circumstances, you may want to add further comments around this, and you can, so it becomes your file note. So from this, all of these forms, even down to things like the workstation or working from home assessment form, again, for even volunteers is important if you're continuing to provide those services. All of this can be done not only from your workstation at work, but from any mobile device. So this is something that actually works right now. As part of this then feeds directly into the decisions that are going into your COVIDSafe plan. So you've got your plan that you can then literally at any point in time go, right, I want to know exactly where we're sitting with every single aspect of what we are doing. And it doesn't matter, because people are working remotely, working from home, working on different days. You can literally get a snapshot by going, right, I want to see exactly where we're sitting at any point in time. You can print off a report, and here we go here. It's just loading up. That bang, you can basically see, and it's as fast as that of exactly what I've just done to see the report that you want to see and when. It means then that if you need to go, right, where are we at with the assessment of our sites, what hasn't been done, you can see that too. So effectively you've got, the importance of this is looking at the plan, then looking at what forms you have to support that, and then what also from a policy part. Once you have your policies, effectively you're able to load them into this section here and effectively go, right, I need to see my policies of what we have, and this is a privacy policy that we have, and you can see and get staff to access them and read them across your specific agency at any point in time. Now, putting this together, as I said, this is something that works with agencies and has been working with agencies. It's not something that is theoretical. It's not something that is in trial. This has been working for the last, running this as the COVID-19 pandemic ramps up, ramps down, lockdowns are changed, measures are made, rules are made. Effectively, As all of these variations occur, new guidelines are issued by the Commonwealth, state or territory governments, chief medical officers are changing their directives. In Victoria, from day to day, we're seeing directives and updates being made. Effectively, this is able to flex for you based on what you need to do. Equally, if you need to assist staff around even working from home requirements as well, then again, giving them the option of actually having their working from home forms and seeing what activities they're actually doing gives you this performance measurement to be able to actually support them and see. So effectively, you've got the access to running the complete project requirements and plans across it. The plan itself, plus policies, plus forms, you're able to bring it all together on a single dashboard for your agency. Now, within it, as we've mentioned around this, the agency COVIDSafe Plan really should obviously consist of your plan, your policy, and your pandemic forms. You can jump into the dashboard around this. We've given you access through it. You're able to effectively get feeds directly from Commonwealth and state governments as well too, because as part of the works that we do with agencies, if there is any new legislation that comes out, then effectively this gets fed directly into your system and you can effectively have this across the board. With that, we will open up the phone lines and computer lines and down the line to answer any questions that you might have. If you do have any questions after today's session, by all means, please contact us on 1300 360 360 or support@gemba360.com.